Picture this. You're standing at the altar in front of 200 guests, but instead of wearing your dream wedding dress, you're draped in a custom-made gown covered in your sister's husband's handwritten confession about his affair. The gasps from the crowd are deafening, your sister's face has gone completely white, and your groom is staring at you like you've lost your mind. But here's the thing. Sometimes the most beautiful revenge comes wrapped in silk and scandal. This is the story of how my sister Vanessa thought she could ruin my wedding day, and how I turned her betrayal into the most unforgettable ceremony Millfield had ever seen. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had the perfect family. Sure, we had our drama, what family doesn't, but I genuinely believed that when push came to shove, we'd always have each other's backs. My sister Vanessa and I had been planning weddings at the same time, which should have been this beautiful bonding experience. Instead, it became the setup for the most devastating betrayal I could have imagined. Let me paint you the picture of how this all started. I'd been with my fiancé Marcus Thompson for 4 years. We met during our graduate programs at Northwestern. He was studying architecture, I was finishing my MBA. Marcus was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner. Thoughtful, ambitious, and patient enough to deal with my admittedly type A personality. When he proposed last Christmas at Millennium Park with the Chicago skyline glittering behind us, I felt like my life was finally clicking into place. The ring was perfect, a vintage Art Deco setting with a cushion-cut diamond that caught the light like captured starlight. Marcus had spent months working with a jeweler in the loop to get it exactly right, even incorporating details from a sketch I doodled in college of my dream engagement ring. It was the kind of proposal that made other couples jealous and gave me butterflies every time I looked at my left hand. Vanessa got engaged 2 months later. Now, I want to be clear about something. I was genuinely happy for her. Vanessa had always been the wild child in our family, the one who jumped from relationship to relationship like she was sampling different flavors of ice cream. She'd moved back to Illinois after a few years of finding herself in California, and when she started dating Derek Mitchell, a successful contractor who owned his own company in Naperville, we were all relieved. Derek seemed to ground her in a way no one else ever had. Their engagement was much more spontaneous than mine. Derek proposed during a weekend trip to Wisconsin Dells. No fancy planning or elaborate setup, just pure emotion and a simple solitaire ring. Vanessa called me sobbing happy tears, and I remember thinking how perfect it was that we'd both be planning our weddings together. We could share vendors, swap ideas, and turn what's usually a stressful time into a celebration of our family growing. That's where everything started to go sideways. The first sign of trouble came during our joint dress shopping appointment at Kleinfeld's sister store in Chicago. I'd made the appointment months in advance. Their waiting list was notorious, and I wanted to make sure we had plenty of time to find our perfect dresses and get them altered. I was so excited to share this experience with Vanessa. I'd always imagined we'd be each other's maids of honor, helping each other find dresses that would make us feel like princesses. The appointment started perfectly. We were assigned to a consultant named Patricia, who had 20 years of experience and immediately understood both of our styles. I gravitated toward classic elegance, clean lines, sophisticated silhouettes, nothing too fussy. Vanessa, true to form, was drawn to more dramatic pieces with intricate beadwork and bold details. After trying on about 6 dresses each, I found it. The dress. It was a custom Vera Wang design that had been returned by another bride whose wedding had been called off. The sample was exactly my size, like it had been waiting for me. The silhouette was perfect, a fitted bodice that highlighted my waist, flowing into a dramatic A-line skirt with the most incredible hand-sewn beadwork I'd ever seen. The back was breathtaking, with covered buttons that ran all the way down to the train and delicate lace appliques that looked like they'd been painted on by angels. When I stepped out of the dressing room, the entire salon went quiet. Patricia actually gasped. Other brides and their families stopped their conversations to stare, but the reaction that mattered most was Vanessa's. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, Elena, you look like you stepped out of a fairy tale. Marcus is going to cry when he sees you. The dress was expensive, more than I'd originally budgeted, but it was so perfect that Marcus and I agreed to adjust other parts of our wedding budget to make it work. Patricia explained that since it was a sample, they could make minor alterations but couldn't change the fundamental structure. That was fine with me. It fit like it had been designed specifically for my body. Vanessa found her dress that same day, a stunning mermaid-style gown with intricate beading and a cathedral-length train. It was completely different from mine, but absolutely perfect for her personality. We left the appointment on cloud 9, already planning our next joint wedding task. Our weddings were scheduled 3 weeks apart. Mine was set for June 15th at the Intercontinental Chicago, with the reception in their stunning ballroom over the lake. Vanessa's was June 6th at a beautiful vineyard in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. The timing was tight, but we'd planned it that way so our out-of-town relatives could attend both celebrations without having to make multiple trips. Everything seemed to be falling into place perfectly. We coordinated our color schemes so they'd complement each other in photos. We even found a photographer who could do both weddings at a discount. Our parents were thrilled that both their daughters were settling down with good men, and the whole family was buzzing with excitement about the upcoming celebrations. The problem started about 2 months before Vanessa's wedding. She'd been acting strange, more secretive than usual, less available for our regular planning sessions. When I asked her about it, she brushed off my concerns, claiming she was just stressed about work. Vanessa worked as a marketing coordinator for a tech startup downtown, and they had been going through some restructuring, so her excuse seemed reasonable enough. But then Derek started acting weird too. Derek and Marcus had become genuine friends during our engagement period. They'd go out for beers, watch Cubs games together, and Derek had even asked Marcus to be a groomsman in their wedding. So when Derek suddenly became distant and started declining Marcus's invitations to hang out, we both noticed. Marcus mentioned it to me after Derek canceled their third planned evening in a row. "I don't know what's going on with him," Marcus said as we sat in our Lincoln Park apartment, surrounded by wedding planning materials. "He used to be so excited about the wedding, always wanting to talk about honeymoon plans and married life. Now he barely responds to my texts." I made some excuse about pre-wedding jitters affecting everyone differently, but privately, I was starting to worry. Vanessa and Derek's relationship had always been intense, lots of passion, but also dramatic fights that would result in temporary breakups before passionate reunions. I hoped they weren't going through another rough patch so close to their wedding. The real warning sign came 3 weeks before Vanessa's wedding, during what should have been a fun family dinner at our parents' house in Evanston. Our mom, Patricia Rodriguez, had prepared this elaborate Mexican feast, all of our childhood favorites. Our dad, Miguel, had taken the afternoon off from his accounting firm to help cook. It was supposed to be a celebration, a chance for both families to come together before the big day. Derek's parents had driven down from Milwaukee, and Marcus's mom had flown in from Denver. The dinner started well enough. Everyone was chatting, sharing embarrassing stories about Vanessa and Derek, looking at wedding planning updates on our phones. But I noticed that Vanessa seemed on edge. She kept checking her phone, barely touched her food, and seemed to be avoiding direct conversation with Derek. Then, during dessert, Derek's phone rang. He glanced at it, and I swear I saw him go pale. He mumbled something about a work emergency and stepped outside to take the call. He was gone for almost 20 minutes, and when he came back, both he and Vanessa were acting like completely different people. The rest of the evening was painfully awkward. Derek kept making these pointed comments about commitment and trust that seemed directed at Vanessa, while she became increasingly defensive and snappy. Marcus and I exchanged worried glances across the table, both of us sensing that something was seriously wrong, but not knowing what to do about it. After everyone left, I pulled Vanessa aside. "V, what's going on? You and Derek seem like you're barely speaking to each other." She immediately became defensive. "Nothing's wrong, Alina. God, why does everyone think something has to be wrong? Can't people just be stressed about their wedding without everyone psychoanalyzing everything?" But I could see right through her. We'd been sisters for 26 years. I knew when Vanessa was lying. Her left eye always twitched slightly when she wasn't telling the truth, and it was practically spasming as she spoke. "Vanessa, I'm not everyone. I'm your sister. If something's wrong, you can talk to me. We're supposed to be in this together, remember? For just a moment, her defensive mask slipped, and I saw something that looked like panic in her eyes. But then she straightened her shoulders and put on that fake bright smile she'd perfected in high school. Everything's fine, Alina. Derek and I are just working through some last-minute wedding details. You know how he gets when he's overwhelmed with work stuff. I wanted to push further, but Marcus appeared in the doorway, jingling his car keys. Ready to go, babe? I've got that early client meeting tomorrow. The moment was gone, and Vanessa's walls were back up. I hugged her goodbye, but she felt stiff in my arms, like she was holding something back. That night, lying in bed next to Marcus, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Marcus was already asleep, his breathing steady and peaceful, but my mind was racing. I kept replaying the evening, trying to figure out what I'd missed, what signs I should have picked up on. If I'd known then what I know now, I would have trusted my instincts. I would have pushed harder, asked more questions, maybe even confronted Derek directly. But I was so focused on my own wedding planning, so excited about my perfect dress and perfect venue and perfect fiancé, that I convinced myself I was overreacting. 2 weeks before Vanessa's wedding, I got a call that changed everything. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The call came from Patricia at the bridal salon at 8:47 on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of my usual pre-work routine, coffee, checking emails, reviewing my presentation for the quarterly marketing review, when my phone buzzed with an unknown Chicago number. Miss Rodriguez, this is Patricia from Kleinfeld, Chicago. I'm calling about your dress. My stomach immediately dropped. In the world of wedding planning, unexpected calls from vendors are never good news. Is everything okay? Please tell me nothing happened to my dress. Well, that's what I'm calling about. There's been a situation, and I need you to come in as soon as possible, preferably today. The tone in her voice made my hands shake. Patricia, you're scaring me. What kind of situation? I'd rather discuss this in person, Miss Rodriguez, but I will say that we've never had anything like this happen in our 20 years of business. I canceled my morning meetings and drove downtown in record time, my mind racing through every possible disaster scenario. Maybe there had been a fire. Maybe someone had spilled something on my dress. Maybe there had been a mix-up with another bride's order. I tried to prepare myself for bad news, but nothing could have prepared me for what Patricia told me when I walked into that salon. She led me to a private consultation room, the same one where Vanessa and I had celebrated finding our perfect dresses just months earlier. But now, Patricia's face was grave, and she kept wringing her hands like she was about to deliver news of a death in the family. Miss Rodriguez, your sister came in yesterday afternoon with your parents and her fiancé. I felt confused. Vanessa was here? Why? She claimed there had been a family emergency and that your wedding had been moved up. She said you were out of town dealing with the crisis and had sent her to pick up your dress for alterations at a different location. The words hit me like a physical blow. She what? She had a notarized letter that appeared to be from you, giving her permission to collect your dress. She knew all the details, your full name, the dress style number, even the specific alterations we'd discussed. Your parents confirmed the story. I stared at Patricia, trying to process what she was telling me. My parents were there? Your mother was crying. She kept talking about how terrible the timing was, with both weddings so close together. Your father seemed very stressed. And the young man with them, Derek, I think, he kept urging everyone to hurry because they had to get to the airport. The room started spinning. Patricia, there is no family emergency. My wedding date hasn't changed. I never sent Vanessa to pick up my dress. Patricia's face went white. Oh my God, Miss Rodriguez, I am so sorry. But your sister, she took your dress. I couldn't breathe. She took my dress? My dress is gone? She said she was taking it to a specialist in Milwaukee who could rush the alterations. She had all the paperwork, and your parents seemed so upset about the emergency. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called my mother. It went straight to voicemail. I tried my father. Same thing. I tried Vanessa. Her phone was disconnected. Patricia, I need you to call the police. Miss Rodriguez, I understand you're upset, but this seems like a family matter. My sister stole my wedding dress using forged documents. That's not a family matter, that's theft and fraud. But even as I said the words, I knew the police wouldn't help. Vanessa had been clever. She'd involved our parents, creating witnesses who would swear they believed the story. She'd used official-looking documents. And most damaging of all, we were sisters. The police would see this as a family dispute, not a crime. I spent the next 6 hours trying to reach my family. My parents' phones continued going straight to voicemail. Vanessa's phone remained disconnected. I drove to their apartment in Naperville, but no one answered the door. I went to Derek's construction office, but his secretary said he'd taken emergency leave for a family crisis. Finally, at around 4 in the afternoon, my mother called me back. Mija, I'm so sorry we couldn't tell you about the emergency sooner. We're at the hospital in Milwaukee with Derek's father. He had a massive heart attack yesterday morning. The story came pouring out. Derek had gotten the call during a meeting with his wedding planner. His father was in critical condition, needed emergency surgery, and the family was devastated. With Vanessa's wedding only 10 days away, they'd made the decision to postpone it indefinitely. But here's where the story got interesting. According to my mother, Vanessa had been so distraught about disappointing everyone that she'd suggested I move my wedding up to take their spot at the vineyard. All the vendors were already booked, the flowers were ordered, and it seemed like a shame to waste such beautiful arrangements. Vanessa thought it would be perfect, my mother explained through tears. She could focus on Derek's father, and you could still have your dream wedding. She even offered to let you use her dress since she won't be needing it right away. Mom, that's very generous, but I already have my own dress. Well, that's the thing, Mija. Vanessa thought your dress might be too formal for a vineyard wedding. She picked it up so she could take it to someone who specializes in outdoor wedding alterations. She wanted to surprise you. Every word out of my mother's mouth made less sense than the last. Mom, this doesn't make any sense. Why didn't anyone call me? Why didn't Vanessa discuss this with me? Everything happened so fast, Alina. Derek's father is in the ICU. Vanessa is beside herself. She thought she was helping. I wanted to scream. Mom, where are you right now? What hospital? St. Mary's in Milwaukee, room 314 in the cardiac unit. I hung up and immediately called St. Mary's Hospital in Milwaukee. There was no cardiac unit. There was no room 314. And when I asked about a patient named Mitchell who'd been admitted for heart surgery, they had no record of anyone by that name. That's when I knew. Vanessa hadn't just stolen my dress. She'd orchestrated an elaborate lie involving our parents to cover her tracks. But why? What could possibly motivate her to do something so cruel and calculated? I drove straight to Vanessa's apartment in Naperville. This time, I didn't knock politely. I used the spare key she'd given me for emergencies and let myself in. The apartment was eerily quiet. Most of their wedding gifts were still stacked in the living room, unopened. But something was off. The energy in the space felt wrong, like the aftermath of a terrible fight. I wandered through the rooms looking for clues about what was really going on. In the bedroom, I noticed that Derek's clothes were gone from the closet. His toiletries were missing from the bathroom. It looked like he'd moved out. But Vanessa's things were still there, including a stack of unopened mail on her dresser, credit card statements, bills, and something that made my blood run cold, a letter from a law firm in downtown Chicago. I shouldn't have opened it, I know that, but after everything that had happened, my normal moral boundaries had completely evaporated. The letter was dated 3 weeks earlier. It was from an attorney named Jonathan Reeves, confirming that his client was ready to proceed with paternity testing and child support proceedings. The client's name was Ashley Chen, and she was claiming that Derek Mitchell was the father of her 6-month-old daughter. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Derek's strange behavior, the phone call during our family dinner, Vanessa's defensiveness and panic. Their relationship fell apart just weeks before their wedding. But that still didn't explain why she'd stolen my dress. I kept searching, feeling like a detective in a crime scene. In Vanessa's home office, I found her laptop still open to her email account. I knew I was crossing every boundary of privacy and decency, but I was beyond caring. The first email that caught my attention was from Derek, sent 2 days earlier. The subject line read, "I can't do this anymore." The message was heartbreaking. Derek confessed that Ashley Chen had contacted him 3 months earlier, claiming he was the father of her baby. He'd initially denied it, but the dates matched up with a work trip to Seattle where he'd made a terrible mistake. He'd been planning to tell Vanessa after their wedding, but Ashley was threatening to go public if he didn't acknowledge paternity. Derek's email went on to explain that he couldn't marry Vanessa while living such a massive lie. He loved her, but he couldn't start their marriage based on deception. He was moving out and calling off the wedding. But the most devastating part was the last paragraph. "I know this destroys everything we planned. I know the venue is booked and paid for, and your family will be devastated. If there's any way to salvage something from this mess, maybe Elena could use our date. At least then the money wouldn't be completely wasted." I stared at that screen for a full 5 minutes, trying to process what I was reading. Derek had suggested that I take over their wedding date, but that didn't explain why Vanessa had stolen my dress without telling me any of this. I scrolled through more emails and found the answer in a message thread between Vanessa and someone named Jessica Martinez. Jessica appeared to be Vanessa's friend from her California days, and their conversation revealed the full scope of my sister's breakdown. Vanessa had been in complete denial about Derek's confession. She'd convinced herself that if she could just make their wedding happen, Derek would come to his senses and realize that their love was stronger than his guilt. She'd been planning to surprise him by showing up in a wedding dress so stunning that he'd forget all about Ashley Chen and their baby. But here's where it got truly twisted. Vanessa had convinced herself that her own dress wasn't beautiful enough to win Derek back. She needed something more spectacular, more perfect. She needed my dress. In her emails to Jessica, Vanessa had written, "Elena's dress is like something from a fairy tale. When Derek sees me in it, he'll remember why he fell in love with me. He'll realize that Ashley Chen was just a mistake and that I'm the one he's supposed to marry." She'd hatched the plan to steal my dress, tell everyone there was a family emergency, and then surprise Derek with a wedding he couldn't refuse. But the plan had fallen apart when Derek refused to go along with it. According to the final email in the thread, he'd packed his things and left town the day after the dress theft, leaving Vanessa alone with her delusions and my stolen wedding gown. I closed the laptop and sat in Vanessa's empty apartment, trying to process the magnitude of her betrayal. She hadn't just stolen my dress, she'd manipulated our parents, forged legal documents, and concocted an elaborate lie about a medical emergency, all because she couldn't accept that her relationship with Derek was over. But where was she now? And more importantly, where was my dress? I searched the apartment more thoroughly and found a receipt tucked inside one of Vanessa's purses. It was from a storage facility in Schaumburg, dated the day after she'd stolen my dress. Unit 247 had been rented for 3 months, paid in advance. As I drove towards Schaumburg, my phone kept buzzing with calls from Marcus. I'd been ignoring them all day, too overwhelmed to explain what was happening. But I knew I couldn't keep him in the dark much longer. Our wedding was in 11 days, and I had no idea if I'd even have a dress to wear. The storage facility was one of those massive concrete complexes with hundreds of identical units. I found Unit 247 and discovered that Vanessa had secured it with a combination lock. I tried her birthday, Derek's birthday, their anniversary date. Nothing worked. I was about to give up when I remembered something. When we were kids, Vanessa always used the same combination for everything. Our grandmother's birthday, 0428. With trembling fingers, I entered the numbers. The lock clicked open. Inside the unit, hanging carefully on a professional garment rack, was my wedding dress. It was still in its protective cover, apparently untouched. But it wasn't alone. Next to my dress hung Vanessa's original wedding gown, along with 3 other dresses I'd never seen before. All of them were white. All of them were wedding dresses. And all of them had tags from different bridal salons in Chicago and Milwaukee. My sister hadn't just stolen my dress. She'd been stealing wedding dresses from multiple shops, building some kind of bizarre collection. On a folding table next to the garment rack, I found a notebook filled with Vanessa's handwriting. page after page of wedding plans, but none of them made sense. She'd sketched out ceremonies with different venues, different themes, different guest lists. It was like she'd been planning dozens of different fantasy weddings. But the most disturbing thing was what I found in a shoebox on the floor. Love letters, dozens of them, all in Derek's handwriting, all addressed to Vanessa. But as I read through them, I realized they weren't recent. The dates went back years, some to when Derek and Vanessa had first started dating. These were letters he'd written during business trips, sweet messages about missing her and looking forward to coming home. But Vanessa had done something to them. She'd taken a red pen and changed words, crossed out sentences, added her own text in the margins. She'd turned Derek's genuine expressions of love into something completely different, obsessive declarations of eternal devotion that bore no resemblance to what he'd actually written. At the bottom of the shoebox, I found the most chilling item of all. A letter in Derek's handwriting that I'd never seen before. But this one was different. This one was recent, and this one hadn't been altered. It was Derek's confession. Derek's confession letter was written on his company letterhead, dated just 4 days earlier. His handwriting was shaky, like his hands had been trembling as he wrote. The letter was addressed to Vanessa, but it was clear from the first line that he'd never intended for her to actually receive it. Vanessa, I'm writing this because I can't find the courage to say these words to your face, and I know I'll never have the strength to send it, but I need to get this out, even if you never read it. What followed was the most raw, honest confession I'd ever encountered. Derek detailed his affair with Ashley Chen during a 3-day business conference in Seattle 8 months earlier. He described how lonely he'd been feeling in his relationship with Vanessa, how their constant fighting had left him emotionally drained, and how Ashley's attention had felt like a lifeline. But the affair wasn't just a one-night mistake. Derek admitted that he and Ashley had continued texting and calling each other for weeks after the conference. They'd met up twice when Ashley came to Chicago for work, always telling themselves it would be the last time. The relationship had only ended when Ashley discovered she was pregnant and Derek panicked, cutting off all contact. The most devastating part of the letter came near the end. I convinced myself that if I could just get through our wedding, I could be the husband you deserve. I thought I could compartmentalize this mistake and build a good life with you. But when Ashley contacted me about the baby, I realized how selfish I've been. You deserve someone who chooses you completely, not someone who's settling for you because it's easier than facing the truth. Derek went on to explain that he'd been trying to find the right moment to tell Vanessa about Ashley and the baby, but every time he worked up the courage, something would happen. A wedding vendor would call, or Vanessa would excitedly show him new decorations she'd found, or their families would start discussing honeymoon plans. The weight of disappointing so many people had paralyzed him. The letter ended with a paragraph that made my hands shake. I know this will destroy you, and I hate myself for it, but I can't marry you while living this lie. Ashley deserves to have her daughter's father acknowledged. The baby deserves better than a father who pretends she doesn't exist. And you deserve better than a husband who's been lying to you for 8 months. I'm leaving tonight. I'll stay away until after what should have been our wedding date, and then we can figure out how to handle the legal and financial mess I've created. I read the letter 3 times, trying to process the implications. Derek had been planning to leave Vanessa before their wedding, but he'd never actually given her this letter. Instead, he'd just disappeared, leaving her to create her own explanations for why their relationship had imploded. But there was something else in the storage unit that caught my attention. A manila folder labeled Wedding Plans in Vanessa's handwriting. Inside, I found copies of all the contracts for her vineyard wedding. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, the florist, everything was still booked and paid for. According to the paperwork, the vendors had been told the wedding was postponed, not canceled. That's when I realized what Vanessa had been planning. She hadn't stolen my dress just to win Derek back. She'd been planning to show up at the vineyard on her original wedding date, in my dress, and force Derek into a confrontation in front of all their guests. She'd probably convinced herself that if she could just get him to the altar, he'd go through with the ceremony out of social pressure. It was a plan born of complete delusion, but it was also incredibly manipulative. Vanessa knew Derek well enough to understand that he hated public confrontations and would do almost anything to avoid embarrassing their families. She'd been betting that his guilt and social anxiety would override his desire to end their relationship. But Derek had outmaneuvered her by simply leaving town. I carefully packed Derek's letter back into the shoebox and loaded my dress into my car. As I drove home, my mind was racing with a mixture of rage and something that felt almost like excitement. Vanessa had tried to destroy my wedding to salvage her own broken relationship. She'd stolen from me, lied to our parents, and created chaos in our entire family. But she'd also handed me the perfect weapon for revenge. When I got home, Marcus was waiting in our living room, pacing like a caged animal. The moment I walked through the door, he rushed over and pulled me into his arms. "Elena, thank God. I've been calling you all day. Your mom called and said there was some kind of family emergency, but she was so vague about the details. Then I couldn't reach you, and I started imagining the worst." I buried my face in his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. For the first time all day, I felt safe. But I also felt the weight of everything I'd discovered pressing down on me. "Marcus, we need to talk, but first, I need you to pour us both a very large glass of wine." Over the next 2 hours, I told Marcus everything. The stolen dress, the fake family emergency, Derek's affair and secret baby, Vanessa's collection of stolen wedding gowns, and the confession letter I'd found in the storage unit. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expressions cycling through confusion, anger, and finally a kind of protective fury I'd never seen from him before. "Elena, this is insane. Your sister needs professional help." "I know, but that's not the point right now. The point is that she tried to destroy our wedding to fix her own problems." Marcus took my hands in his. "Okay, but we have your dress back. We can report the other stolen dresses to the police. We can get through this." "Marcus, I don't just want to get through this. I want Vanessa to face consequences for what she's done." "What are you thinking?" That's when I told him about my plan. Vanessa's vineyard wedding was still scheduled for 3 days from now. All the vendors were expecting a postponement announcement, but no formal cancellation had been made. The guest list included not just our immediate families, but Derek's business associates, Vanessa's coworkers, and dozens of friends from high school and college. These were people who'd been following the drama of their on-again, off-again relationship for years. What if, I suggested, instead of postponing the wedding, we showed up? Marcus stared at me. "Elena, what are you talking about?" "Think about it. Vanessa stole my dress because she thought it would help her win Derek back. She was planning to ambush him at their own wedding in front of everyone they know. But Derek's gone. He's not coming back." "Okay. So what if we took her place? What if we showed up at the vineyard in front of all those guests and exposed exactly what kind of person Vanessa really is?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "You want to crash your sister's wedding to humiliate her publicly? I want to crash my sister's already ruined wedding to make sure everyone knows why it was ruined." "Elena, that's..." He paused, running his hands through his hair. "That's pretty nuclear. She stole my wedding dress, Marcus. She manipulated our parents. She's been stealing from other brides. She tried to force her ex-fiancé into a marriage based on lies and emotional manipulation. This isn't just about what she did to me. This is about who she really is." Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "What exactly are you proposing we do?" Derek wrote a confession letter that explains everything. His affair, the baby, why he left, everything. What if we made sure that letter got read at Vanessa's wedding? "You want to read Derek's private letter to a room full of people?" "I want Derek's truth to be heard. Vanessa has been controlling the narrative, making herself the victim of Derek's sudden abandonment. But the guests deserve to know what really happened." Marcus turned back to me. "And how exactly would we make that happen?" That's when I told him the most audacious part of my plan. We show up at the vineyard. We tell everyone that Derek asked us to deliver a message explaining his absence. And then we read his confession letter to the entire wedding party. Elena, that's brilliant. I was going to say potentially illegal and definitely cruel. Crueler than stealing someone's wedding dress? Crueler than lying to elderly parents about a medical emergency? Crueler than forcing someone into a marriage they don't want? Marcus sat back down next to me. You're talking about destroying your relationship with your sister forever. Marcus, my relationship with my sister was destroyed the moment she decided to steal from me and lie to our family. I'm just talking about making sure everyone else knows who she really is. We talked until almost midnight, going through every aspect of the plan. Marcus played devil's advocate, pointing out all the ways it could backfire. But eventually, even he had to admit that Vanessa's behavior had been so outrageous that some kind of public reckoning seemed justified. Okay, he finally said, let's say we do this. Let's say we show up at the vineyard and read Derek's letter. What happens afterward? Afterward, people know the truth. Vanessa can't play the victim anymore. Derek's reputation is cleared. And maybe, just maybe, she faces some actual consequences for her actions. And what about your own wedding? What about your dress? That's when I revealed the final piece of my plan. Marcus, I don't want to wear that dress anymore. What do you mean? That dress was supposed to represent the most beautiful day of my life. But now, every time I look at it, I'll think about Vanessa stealing it. I'll think about her wearing it while she plotted to manipulate Derek. I'll think about the lies and the betrayal and the chaos she created. Marcus looked confused. So what are you saying? I'm saying that if we're going to crash Vanessa's wedding to expose her lies, we might as well make a statement while we're doing it. Elena, you're scaring me a little bit. I took Derek's confession letter out of my purse and held it up. What if we turned this letter into something everyone could see? What if we made it impossible to ignore? I still don't understand what you're proposing. Marcus, what if I wore Derek's confession letter to Vanessa's wedding? The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at me like I'd suggested we rob a bank. You want to wear a letter? I want to turn Derek's letter into a dress. I want every word of his confession printed on fabric and sewn into a gown that looks like a wedding dress. I want to walk into that vineyard looking like a bride, but instead of wearing silk and lace, I want to be covered in Derek's truth. Marcus blinked slowly. Elena, that's either the most brilliant revenge plan I've ever heard, or you've had a complete psychological break. Maybe both.
How would you even make something like that? I know someone. The someone was Rebecca Martinez, a fashion design student at the Art Institute of Chicago who'd been working part-time at a custom printing shop downtown. Rebecca and I had met at a networking event for young professionals, and we'd stayed in touch through social media. More importantly, Rebecca specialized in experimental textiles and had been posting photos of dresses made from unconventional materials, newspaper print, sheet music, even printouts of computer code. I called Rebecca at 7 in the morning, knowing she was an early riser. Elena, girl, it's been forever. What's going on? Rebecca, I need a favor. A really big, really weird favor. I'm listening. I need you to help me make a wedding dress out of a confession letter. There was a pause. I'm sorry, what? I explained the situation as quickly as possible, focusing on the technical aspects of what I needed rather than the emotional drama behind it. Rebecca listened without interrupting, and I could practically hear her mind working through the design challenges. So you want Derek's handwritten letter reproduced as fabric and sewn into a formal gown? Exactly, something that looks elegant from a distance but reveals the text when people get closer. How much time do we have? 2 days. Rebecca laughed. Elena, you realize that's completely insane, right? Yes. And you realize that once you do this, there's no taking it back? Yes. And you're sure you want to nuclear bomb your family relationships for the sake of making a point? Rebecca, my sister stole my wedding dress and has been stealing from other brides. She manipulated our parents and tried to force her ex-fiancé into a marriage based on lies. The nuclear bomb has already gone off. I'm just deciding whether to clean up the debris or add some fireworks to the explosion.
In that case, Rebecca said, let's make you the most memorable wedding crasher in Illinois history. Rebecca's studio was a converted warehouse space in Pilsen, filled with mannequins draped in experimental fabrics and half-finished garments that looked like they belonged in a modern art museum. When Marcus and I arrived the next morning, she already had Derek's confession letter scanned and displayed on multiple computer screens, analyzing the text layout and handwriting patterns. This is actually fascinating from a design perspective, Rebecca said, gesturing to the screens. Derek's handwriting has this really interesting flow. The letters are cramped at the beginning when he's nervous, but they get more expansive as he gets into the emotional parts. We can use that rhythm to create visual texture in the dress. She'd been up all night working on mock-ups, and the preliminary designs were breathtaking. Rebecca had figured out how to reproduce Derek's handwriting as a repeating pattern that would look like elegant script from a distance, but resolve into readable text up close. The dress would be fitted through the bodice with a flowing A-line skirt, sophisticated enough to pass for formal wedding attire until someone got close enough to read the words. The technical challenge, Rebecca explained, is making sure the text remains legible while still creating a garment that's structurally sound. I'm thinking we use a high-quality silk base with the text printed in a slightly darker tone, subtle enough to look like decorative patterns from across a room. Marcus was examining one of the digital mock-ups. Rebecca, this is incredible, but are you sure this is even possible in 2 days? It's going to require calling in some serious favors. I know a guy who runs a custom textile printing operation in Chinatown. He owes me for helping design his daughter's quinceañera dress. And my roommate works at a high-end alteration shop downtown. If we can get the fabric printed by tomorrow morning, we can have the dress finished by Saturday afternoon. What about sizing? I asked. You've never actually measured me. Rebecca grinned. Elena, I've been stalking your Instagram for the past 2 hours. I found those photos from your engagement party where you're wearing that fitted black dress. Based on those pictures and some basic measurements, I can get pretty close. We'll do final fittings tomorrow evening. The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. Rebecca's textile printer, a soft-spoken man named Chen, who operated out of a basement shop that smelled like ink and possibility, was initially skeptical about the project. But when Rebecca explained that we were exposing someone who'd been stealing wedding dresses from other brides, his expression shifted to one of righteous anger. My daughter got married last year, he told us as he examined Derek's letter. If someone had stolen her dress, he shook his head. We make this perfect, no charge. While Chen worked on printing yards of silk with Derek's confession, Rebecca and I refined the design. She'd decided to structure the dress so that the most damaging revelations, Derek's admission of the affair, his description of Ashley's pregnancy, his explanation for leaving, would be prominently featured on the bodice and upper skirt where they'd be easily visible. The psychology of reading, Rebecca explained as she sketched modifications, people's eyes naturally go to the center of the body first, then sweep outward. We want to make sure the most important information hit them immediately.
Meanwhile, Marcus was handling the logistics of our wedding crash. He'd called the vineyard and spoken to the event coordinator, explaining that he was Derek's best man and had been asked to deliver a message from the groom to the assembled guests. The coordinator, who was clearly confused about the constantly changing wedding plans, had agreed to let Marcus address the crowd before the ceremony was officially canceled. She seemed relieved that someone was finally taking charge of the situation, Marcus reported. Apparently, they've been getting conflicting instructions from different family members all week. On Friday evening, Rebecca called us to her studio for the final fitting. When she pulled the dress out of its garment bag, I actually gasped. From a distance, it looked like an elegant ivory gown with sophisticated script detailing. But as I got closer, Derek's words began to resolve into focus. Vanessa, I'm writing this because I can't find the courage to say these words to your face, ran along the sweetheart neckline. The bodice featured the paragraph about Derek's affair with Ashley, each line of text creating a subtle striped pattern across the fitted silhouette. The skirt bloomed out with Derek's explanation of why he'd left, his words about not being able to live with the lies flowing down the fabric like water. When I put the dress on, the effect was even more striking. The fit was perfect,
Rebecca had somehow managed to create a garment that was both a masterpiece of technical skill and a devastating weapon of truth. "How do I look?" I asked, turning to face Marcus and Rebecca. Marcus was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Elena, you look like a avenging angel." Rebecca was practically vibrating with excitement. "This is the most insane thing I've ever created, and I once made a dress out of recycled computer keyboards. You're going to give everyone at that vineyard nightmares for the rest of their lives." But as I looked at myself in Rebecca's full-length mirror, I felt a moment of doubt. The woman staring back at me looked beautiful and terrible, like something from a fairy tale where the princess has decided to burn down the kingdom instead of waiting to be rescued. "Marcus, am I going too far?" He walked over and stood behind me, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "Elena, your sister stole your wedding dress to manipulate a man into a marriage he didn't want. She involved your parents in an elaborate lie. She's been stealing from other brides. If this is too far, then she crossed that line first." "But what if I regret this tomorrow?" "Then we'll deal with that tomorrow. But right now, Vanessa thinks she can get away with treating people like chess pieces in her personal drama. Maybe it's time someone showed her that actions have consequences." Saturday morning dawned gray and drizzly, which felt appropriate for what we were about to do. I spent an hour getting my hair and makeup done by a friend from college who thought we were attending a wedding as guests. When she asked why I was wearing white to someone else's wedding, I told her it was a themed event. Marcus had rented a tuxedo and was carrying a leather portfolio containing copies of Derek's original letter, printed on his company letterhead. We'd also prepared a brief statement explaining why we were sharing Derek's private confession, focusing on the need to correct the false narrative that had been circulating about his disappearance. The drive to Lake Geneva took about 2 hours, giving us plenty of time to go over our plan one final time. Marcus would approach the event coordinator when we arrived and explain that Derek had asked him to make an announcement. I would wait in the parking lot until Marcus texted me, then make my entrance just as he began reading Derek's statement. "The timing has to be perfect," Marcus said as we turned onto the vineyard's winding driveway. "If I start reading before you appear, people will be focused on me instead of you. But if you come in too early, they might stop me before I get to the important parts." The vineyard was even more beautiful than I'd expected. Rolling hills covered in grapevines stretched toward Lake Geneva, and the ceremony space was set up in a natural amphitheater, with the lake sparkling in the background. White chairs were arranged in perfect rows, and an elaborate floral arch marked the spot where Vanessa and Derek should have exchanged vows. About 150 guests were already seated, dressed in their wedding best and chatting quietly among themselves. I recognized most of the faces: family friends, college classmates, Derek's business associates. These were people who'd been invested in Vanessa and Derek's relationship for years, who'd watched them break up and reconcile multiple times, who'd probably bought gifts and made travel arrangements for this wedding. From my position behind a cluster of oak trees, I could see my parents in the front row. My mother was wearing the navy blue dress she'd bought specifically for Vanessa's wedding, and my father looked uncomfortable in his formal suit. They kept checking their phones and whispering to each other, clearly confused about what was supposed to happen next. Marcus texted me at exactly 2:15. "Event coordinator is making an announcement now. Get ready." I watched as a woman in a vineyard staff uniform approached the microphone that had been set up at the front of the ceremony space. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We have an important message from the groom that will explain the current situation." That was Marcus's cue. He walked up to the microphone with the confidence of someone who belonged there, his letter portfolio tucked under his arm like he was giving a business presentation. "Good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Marcus Thompson, Derek's best man. Derek asked me to come here today because he couldn't face delivering this message himself." A murmur went through the crowd. I could see people leaning forward in their chairs, straining to hear every word. "Derek wanted me to read you a letter he wrote explaining why he can't go through with this wedding. He felt you all deserve to hear the truth directly from him, rather than through rumors or speculation." That was my cue. I stepped out from behind the oak trees and began walking down the makeshift aisle, just as Marcus opened Derek's letter and began to read. Vanessa, I'm writing this because I can't find the courage to say these words to your face. The reaction was immediate and electric. Heads turned as I appeared, and I heard several sharp intakes of breath as people registered what I was wearing. The white dress, the formal presentation, the timing of my arrival. For a split second, some of the guests probably thought I was Vanessa making a dramatic entrance. But as I got closer, the text on my dress became visible, and the whispers started. 8 months ago, during a business conference in Seattle, I made the worst mistake of my life. Marcus continued reading, his voice carrying clearly across the vineyard. I had an affair with a woman named Ashley Chen. The whispers became gasps. I was halfway down the aisle now, and people were openly staring at my dress, their eyes widening as they realized what they were looking at. Ashley contacted me 3 months ago to tell me that she gave birth to my daughter. Someone in the crowd actually stood up to get a better look at my dress. I could see people pointing, nudging their neighbors, pulling out their phones. The carefully orchestrated wedding atmosphere was dissolving into chaos, and I was the catalyst walking calmly through the center of it all. I've been lying to Vanessa for 8 months about this affair and about my daughter. I reached the front of the ceremony space just as Marcus got to the most devastating part of Derek's confession. My parents were staring at me in complete shock, their faces cycling through confusion, recognition, and growing horror as they processed what was happening. I can't marry Vanessa while living this lie. Ashley deserves to have her daughter's father acknowledged. The baby deserves better than a father who pretends she doesn't exist. And Vanessa deserves better than a husband who's been lying to her for 8 months. The crowd was in complete uproar now. People were standing, talking over each other, demanding explanations. Someone was crying. Someone else was taking pictures. The event coordinator was trying to approach the microphone, but Marcus held up his hand and continued reading. I'm leaving tonight. I'll stay away until after what should have been our wedding date, and then we can figure out how to handle the legal and financial mess I've created. That's when I saw Vanessa. She was standing at the edge of the ceremony space, partially hidden behind the catering tent. She must have been there the whole time, watching from a distance, probably planning to make some kind of last-minute appeal to the guests or to Derek if he showed up. But now she was staring at me like she was seeing a ghost. Her face had gone completely white, and she was swaying slightly on her feet like she might faint. She was wearing a simple black dress, appropriate for a funeral, which is essentially what this had become. Our eyes met across the chaos of confused guests and whispered conversations. For a moment, the entire vineyard seemed to go quiet, like we were the only two people in the world. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Then she turned and ran toward the parking lot, her heels clicking frantically on the stone pathway. Marcus finished reading Derek's letter and looked up at the stunned crowd. Derek asked me to apologize to everyone who made travel arrangements or bought gifts for this celebration. He knows his actions have caused pain and confusion, and he takes full responsibility for that. Then he looked directly at my parents. He also asked me to apologize specifically to Vanessa's family, who welcomed him with such warmth and who deserved better than this situation. The silence that followed was deafening. 150 people sat in perfect stillness, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Then my mother stood up slowly and walked toward me, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. "Elena," she said quietly, "what have you done?" My mother's question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had already consumed everything in its path. The vineyard had erupted into complete chaos around us. Guests were clustered in small groups, their voices rising as they dissected what they'd just witnessed. Someone was taking pictures of me. Others were calling people who hadn't attended to relay the shocking turn of events. A few were quietly gathering their purses and heading for the parking lot, clearly wanting no part of whatever family drama they'd accidentally wandered into. "Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I exposed the truth." "The truth?" Her voice cracked with emotion. Elena, you just humiliated your sister in front of everyone she knows. You turned her wedding into a spectacle. Her wedding? I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. Mom, there was no wedding. Derek left town a week ago. Vanessa has been living in a fantasy, and you've been enabling it. My father had joined us now, his face grim. Elena, your mother told me about the family emergency, about Derek's father in the hospital. We were trying to help Vanessa during a crisis. Dad, there is no crisis. There's no sick father-in-law. Derek's parents are fine. Vanessa made up that entire story to steal my wedding dress. I watched my parents' faces as the pieces began clicking into place. The confusion, the skepticism, and finally, the dawning realization that they'd been manipulated. That's impossible, my mother whispered. Vanessa was so upset about Derek's father, she was crying. She was crying because Derek confessed to having an affair and fathering another woman's child. She was crying because he left her rather than go through with a wedding based on lies. And instead of dealing with that reality, she decided to steal my dress and drag all of you into her delusion. Marcus appeared at my elbow, still carrying the leather portfolio with Derek's letter. Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez, I know this is overwhelming, but Elena has proof of everything she's saying. My father's business instincts kicked in. What kind of proof? Marcus opened the portfolio and handed my father copies of the emails Elena had found on Vanessa's laptop, the receipt from the storage unit, and photos of the other stolen wedding dresses. As my parents read through the evidence, their expressions shifted from skepticism to horror.
Dios me, my mother breathed, staring at the photos of the storage unit. Vanessa stole dresses from other brides? Multiple dresses, Mom. She's been building some kind of collection. And she forged documents to get my dress from the bridal salon. My father looked up from the papers, his face gray. Helena, why didn't you come to us with this information? Why did you handle it this way? Because you wouldn't have believed me, just like you didn't believe me when I told you there was no family emergency. Vanessa had you so convinced that you helped her commit theft. We didn't know, my mother started, but I cut her off. You didn't want to know. You saw what you wanted to see because it was easier than dealing with the truth about who Vanessa really is. The conversation was interrupted by Derek's business partner, a tall man named Robert Chen, who'd introduced himself earlier. He approached our family group with his phone in his hand, looking confused and concerned. Excuse me, Marcus. I just got off the phone with Derek. He's in Phoenix, working on a project for my company. He says he has no idea what's happening here, and that he never asked anyone to read a letter on his behalf. The blood in my veins turned to ice. He's in Phoenix? Has been all week. We flew out there together last Sunday for a commercial development project. Derek seemed fine, focused on work, not mentioning any family emergencies or wedding drama. Marcus and I exchanged glances. We'd assumed Derek had left town to avoid the wedding, but apparently he'd been on a normal business trip, completely unaware that we were crashing his ex-fiance's wedding and reading his private letter to a crowd of people. Mr. Chen, Marcus said carefully, did Derek mention anything about his relationship with Vanessa? About any problems they might be having? He said the wedding was postponed due to a family illness, but he seemed relieved about it, honestly. Said it would give them time to work through some issues. Robert looked around at the chaos surrounding us. What exactly is going on here? Before any of us could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Parking lot, now. We need to talk. V. I showed the message to Marcus, who immediately shook his head. Elena, that's not a good idea. She's probably furious. She has every right to be furious, but I'm not hiding from her. I'm coming with you. No. I handed him my purse. This conversation needs to happen between sisters, but stay close enough to hear me scream. The walk to the parking lot felt like a death march. Guests were streaming out of the vineyard now, the illusion of a wedding celebration completely shattered. I passed clusters of people whispering and pointing at me, some with expressions of fascination, others with obvious disapproval. I found Vanessa leaning against her car, a black BMW sedan that Derek had helped her buy last year. She'd been crying, but her tears had dried into streaks of mascara that made her look like a tragic actress at the end of a particularly devastating play. Alina. Vanessa. We stared at each other across the gravel parking lot. Up close, I could see how much weight she'd lost in the past few weeks. Her black dress hung loosely on her frame, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "That was quite a performance," she said finally. "It wasn't a performance. It was the truth. The truth according to Derek's letter, you mean? The letter he never intended for me to see, let alone for you to turn into whatever that thing is you're wearing." I looked down at my dress, Derek's words still clearly visible across the silk fabric. "Derek's truth is the only version that matters, Vanessa. It's his life, his choices, his reasons for leaving." "His truth?" Vanessa laughed bitterly. "Elena, you have no idea what Derek and I went through together. You have no idea what our relationship was really like. I know he was planning to leave you before the wedding. I know he couldn't face marrying you while lying about Ashley and the baby. And I know that Derek has always been a coward when it comes to difficult conversations. Do you really think his version of events is the whole story?" For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt a flicker of doubt. "What are you talking about?" Vanessa pulled out her phone and scrolled through her photos. "Derek didn't just have an affair with Ashley Chen, Elena. He was cheating on me for months before that Seattle conference. Ashley was just the one who got pregnant." She showed me a series of text message screenshots, conversations between Derek and various women dating back over a year. The messages were flirtatious, suggestive, and clearly indicating ongoing emotional affairs, even if they hadn't all become physical. Derek has been a serial cheater for most of our relationship. I've known about it for almost 2 years. I stared at the screenshots, trying to process what she was showing me. If you knew he was cheating, why were you still planning to marry him? Because I thought I could change him. Because I thought if I could just be perfect enough, beautiful enough, exciting enough, he'd stop looking at other women and focus on me. Vanessa, that's pathetic, delusional. Trust me, Alina, I'm well aware of how it sounds. But when you love someone, really love them, you convince yourself that people can change.
But stealing my dress, lying to our parents, hoarding other brides' dresses in a storage unit? Vanessa's composure finally cracked. I was desperate, okay? I knew Derek was planning to leave me. I could see it in the way he looked at me, the way he pulled away whenever I tried to talk about our future. I thought if I could just make our wedding spectacular enough, beautiful enough, he'd remember why he fell in love with me in the first place. So you decided to steal my dress to make yourself more appealing to a man who's been cheating on you for years? I decided to do whatever it took to save my relationship. And yes, that included borrowing your dress. Borrowing? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Vanessa, you didn't borrow my dress. You stole it, using forged documents and an elaborate lie about a medical emergency. I was going to return it. When? After you wore it to manipulate Derek into a marriage he clearly didn't want? Vanessa leaned back against her car, suddenly looking exhausted. Elena, you don't understand what it's like to watch the person you love slip away from you. You and Marcus have this perfect relationship where you trust each other completely and never have to worry about infidelity or lies. You have no idea what it's like to live with constant doubt and jealousy. You're right, I don't understand that. But I do understand that stealing from your sister and manipulating your family isn't the solution to relationship problems. And humiliating me in front of everyone I know? We stood there in silence for a moment, both of us breathing heavily from the emotional intensity of the confrontation. Around us, wedding guests continued to stream toward their cars, some still taking pictures with their phones. Vanessa, I said finally, what you did to me was unforgivable, but what you've been doing to yourself is almost worse. What do you mean? You've been trying to win the love of a man who doesn't respect you. You've been compromising your values and your relationships with your family to chase someone who's been lying to you for years. Don't you think you deserve better than that? Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. Derek and I have history, Elena. We've been through so much together. Trauma bonding isn't the same thing as love. Don't psychoanalyze me. I'm not psychoanalyzing you. I'm telling you what I see as your sister. You're brilliant, beautiful, and talented. You could have any man you want. Why are you so determined to cling to one who treats you like you're disposable? Because, Vanessa's voice broke, because if I can't make it work with Derek, then maybe I'm just not capable of being loved. The admission hung between us like a bridge neither of us was sure we wanted to cross. For all of Vanessa's manipulation and betrayal, I could see the broken person underneath, someone who'd been so damaged by Derek's treatment that she'd lost sight of her own worth. Vanessa, Derek's inability to love you faithfully has nothing to do with your worth as a person. It has everything to do with his character. Easy for you to say. You've never been cheated on. You're right, I haven't. But I have been betrayed by someone I trusted completely, by my sister, who decided that her relationship problems were more important than my wedding, my feelings, and my trust. Vanessa looked up at me, and for the first time in our conversation, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. Elena, I know what I did was wrong. I was just so desperate to save things with Derek that I stopped thinking clearly. Vanessa, you didn't just stop thinking clearly. You planned an elaborate theft. You forged documents. You manipulated our parents. You've been stealing from other brides. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a sustained campaign of deception. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. I know, and I hate myself for it. Hating yourself isn't enough. You need to make this right. How? How do I make any of this right? I've destroyed my relationship with Derek, destroyed my relationship with you, disappointed our parents, and humiliated myself in front of everyone I know. You start by returning the other wedding dresses you stole, you contact those brides and apologize. You get professional help to deal with whatever made you think this behavior was acceptable. And you accept that your relationship with Derek is over. And what about our relationship? What about us? I looked at my sister, standing in that parking lot in her funeral dress, mascara streaked down her face, asking for forgiveness for betrayals that had cut deeper than anything I'd ever experienced. I don't know, Vanessa. I honestly don't know if I can trust you again. Elena, please, you're my sister. We can't let Derek destroy our family. Derek didn't destroy our family, Vanessa. You did. When you decided that winning back a cheating boyfriend was more important than your relationship with me. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Everything okay? Cops just pulled into the parking lot. I looked toward the vineyard entrance and saw 2 police cars slowly making their way up to Gravel Drive. Vanessa, did you call the police? She shook her head. No, but someone probably complained about the disruption. Or maybe one of the other brides you mentioned figured out that her dress was in my storage unit. The reality of our situation suddenly hit me. We were standing in a parking lot full of wedding guests who'd just witnessed the most dramatic family meltdown in Lake Geneva history. Vanessa had a collection of stolen wedding dresses in a storage unit. I was wearing a dress made from a private letter that Derek hadn't given permission to share. And now the police were involved.
Elena, Vanessa said urgently, whatever happens next, please don't tell them about the other dresses. I'll return them all, I promise. But if this becomes a criminal matter, Vanessa, it already is a criminal matter. You committed theft and fraud. Please, I'm begging you, give me a chance to make this right without destroying my entire life. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw not the confident, rebellious woman who'd always seemed to land on her feet no matter what chaos she created. I saw someone who'd lost herself so completely in a toxic relationship that she'd forgotten who she used to be. The police cars were getting closer, and I could see Marcus walking toward us from the vineyard, his expression tense. Vanessa, I said finally, I'll give you 24 hours to return those dresses and contact those brides. After that, I'm telling the police everything. Elena, thank you. I promise And I want Derek's letter back, the original. It's in my apartment. I'll bring it to you tomorrow. And Vanessa, I want you to get help, real help, because what you did to me was just a symptom of something much bigger that's going wrong in your life.
The police cars pulled into the parking lot just as Marcus reached us. One of the officers got out and approached our group, his expression suggesting he was already tired of whatever drama he was about to have to mediate. "Folks, we got a call about a disturbance at a wedding. Does anyone want to explain what's going on here?" Officer Martinez was a patient man in his 40s who looked like he'd seen every possible variation of family drama during his years on the force. He listened to our carefully edited explanation that there had been a misunderstanding about wedding plans and some heated family discussions, with the kind of professional skepticism that suggested he knew we weren't telling him everything. "So let me get this straight," he said, consulting his notepad. "The bride and groom called off their wedding, but nobody told the guests until today?" "The situation was complicated," Marcus offered diplomatically. "There were communication issues between the families." Officer Martinez looked at me, taking in Derek's confession dress with raised eyebrows. "And you decided to wear— what is that exactly?" "It's a statement piece," I said, which was technically true. "A statement about what?" Before I could answer, Vanessa stepped forward. "Officer, this is just a family disagreement that got out of hand. Nobody committed any crimes. We just need some space to work things out privately." Officer Martinez studied Vanessa's face, noting the streaked makeup and obvious distress. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need any assistance?" "I'm fine, just disappointed about the wedding being canceled." The second officer, a younger woman named Officer Chen, was interviewing some of the departing guests. I could see her taking notes as people explained what they'd witnessed. A woman in a text-covered dress, a man reading a letter about infidelity, guests fleeing in confusion. "Folks, Officer Martinez said, I'm going to need you to come down to the station to give formal statements about what happened here today." My heart sank. Are we under arrest? Not at this time, but we've got reports of a public disturbance, possible harassment, and some questions about property that may not belong to the right people. That last comment was clearly directed at my dress. Someone had obviously recognized that Derek's letter was private correspondence and questioned whether we had permission to display it publicly. "Officer," Marcus said, "we're happy to cooperate, but could we schedule this for tomorrow? We have some family matters to resolve first." Officer Martinez considered this. "I can give you until Monday morning at 9 a.m., but if you don't show up voluntarily, we'll come looking for you." As the police cars pulled away, the three of us stood in the now nearly empty parking lot. Most of the guests had fled, leaving behind only a few close family members who were huddled near the vineyard entrance, clearly unsure whether to leave or stay. "Elena," Vanessa said quietly, "what are you going to tell the police on Monday?" "I'm going to tell them the truth about the stolen dresses. Unless you beat me to it. And Derek's letter. That's between Derek and his lawyers now. When he finds out what we did with his private correspondence, he'll probably have his own legal issues to discuss with us." Marcus checked his phone. "Speaking of Derek, I just got 3 missed calls from him. Robert Chen must have filled him in on what happened." "You need to call him back," I said. "He deserves to know that we turned his private letter into public entertainment." "Elena, that's not how I'd describe what we did." "Marcus, that's exactly what we did. We took Derek's most vulnerable moment and turned it into a weapon against Vanessa. The fact that she deserved it doesn't change what we did." The weight of our actions was finally settling in. In my rage about the stolen dress, I'd lost sight of the fact that Derek had never consented to having his confession shared with anyone, let alone read aloud at what should have been his wedding.
Vanessa was quiet for a moment, then said, "Elena, there's something else you need to know about Derek's letter." "What?" "The version you found, it wasn't the only letter he wrote." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "Derek wrote me multiple drafts of his confession over the past few weeks. The one you found was the harshest version, the one where he was trying to convince himself to leave me. But there were others where he talked about wanting to work things out, about loving me despite his mistakes." "Are you saying he didn't want to end things?" "I'm saying Derek was conflicted. The letter you turned into a dress represents one side of his feelings, but not the whole picture." Marcus looked skeptical. "Vanessa, where are these other letters?" "In my apartment, along with text messages from Derek asking if we could meet somewhere private to talk things through."
The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. He wanted to meet with you? He was supposed to call me when he got back from Phoenix. That's why I was at the vineyard today. I thought maybe he'd show up to try to salvage things. But you stole Elena's dress before Derek even left for his business trip, Marcus pointed out. I stole the dress because I was panicking. When Derek started pulling away, I convinced myself that our wedding needed to be perfect enough to remind him why he fell in love with me. It was never supposed to go this far. I felt like I was drowning in information that contradict everything I thought I knew about the situation. Vanessa, are you saying that Derek might have been willing to work things out if you hadn't created this whole elaborate drama? I'm saying I'll never know now, because instead of waiting for him to come back and talk to me like an adult, I went completely insane and dragged our entire family into my breakdown. My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. The caller ID showed Rebecca Martinez. Elena, oh my God, are you okay? I've been seeing pictures all over social media of you in the dress at some kind of wedding disaster. What happened? Rebecca, it's complicated. Can I call you back? Wait, before you hang up, I need to tell you something. After you left yesterday, I started feeling weird about the whole project, so I did some research on Derek Mitchell. What kind of research? Public record stuff. Elena, Derek filed for a marriage license with someone named Ashley Chen 2 weeks ago in Cook County. The world stopped spinning. What? Derek and Ashley Chen have a marriage license. They're planning to get married. I looked at Vanessa, who was watching my face intently. Did you know? I asked her. Know what? I put the phone on speaker. Rebecca, can you repeat what you just told me? Rebecca's voice came through clearly. Derek Mitchell and Ashley Chen filed for a marriage license in Cook County on August 23rd. If they follow through, they'll be married within 30 days of filing. Vanessa's face went completely white. She sank down onto the hood of her car like her legs had given out. That's impossible, she whispered. Derek loves me. He's confused about Ashley and the baby, but he loves me. Vanessa, I said gently, Derek isn't confused. He's moved on. He's marrying Ashley. But the letters, the text messages asking to meet. What exactly did those text messages say? Vanessa pulled out her phone with shaking hands and scrolled through her messages. As she read them, her expression changed from hope to devastation. He was asking to meet so he could get his belongings from our apartment and to discuss dividing our shared bank account. Not to reconcile? Not to reconcile. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. Elena, what have I done? I destroyed my relationship with you, humiliated myself in front of everyone I know, and Derek was never coming back anyway. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, We need to call Derek, right now. We need to explain what happened today and apologize for violating his privacy. I nodded. And we need to figure out how to handle this situation with the police on Monday. And I need to return those wedding dresses, Vanessa added quietly. God, Elena, I can't believe I stole from other brides. What kind of person does that? A person who was having a breakdown, I said. Which doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. We stood there in the parking lot as the sun began to set over Lake Geneva. 3 people who'd managed to turn a canceled wedding into a complete disaster. In the distance, I could see the vineyard staff beginning to clean up the abandoned ceremony space, probably wondering what kind of family creates that level of chaos. Elena, Vanessa said, I know I don't have the right to ask for anything else, but I need you to know that I never meant for things to go this far. I couldn't accept that Derek was done with me. Vanessa, I understand that you were in pain, but you made choices that hurt other people because you couldn't deal with your own problems. I know, and I'll spend however long it takes making it right. Starting with those stolen dresses? Starting with those stolen dresses. As we finally prepared to leave the vineyard, I caught sight of myself in Vanessa's car window. Derek's confession was still spread across my dress in elegant script, but words that had seemed so powerful just hours earlier now feeling like artifacts from someone else's drama. Marcus, I said, I want to burn this dress when we get home. Are you sure? Rebecca put a lot of work into it. I'm sure. It served its purpose, but I never want to see Derek's words again. What about your original dress, the one Vanessa stole? I looked at my sister, who was staring at the ground like she wished she could disappear into it. I think that dress has too much history attached to it now, too. When this is all over, I want to start fresh. New dress, new venue, new everything. Even if it means postponing our wedding?
Even if it means postponing our wedding. Because after everything that had happened, I knew one thing for certain. I wanted to marry Marcus in a dress that represented hope and joy, not revenge and family betrayal. And that was going to take some time to find. 3 months later, I was standing in a completely different bridal salon, trying on my third wedding dress of the year. This one was nothing like the elaborate Vera Wang that had started this whole mess. It was simple, elegant, and most importantly, it had no history attached to it except the joy I felt when I put it on. "How does it feel?" asked Sarah, the consultant who'd been patiently helping me rebuild my wedding vision from scratch. "Perfect," I said, and for the first time in months, I actually meant it. The dress was a classic A-line with delicate lace sleeves and a chapel train. It was beautiful without being ostentatious, romantic without being overdramatic. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a bride, not a woman planning revenge or making statements about family betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Court update. Vanessa pled guilty to all charges, community service and restitution, no jail time." I'd been expecting this news, but it still hit me harder than I anticipated. The legal aftermath of our vineyard disaster had been swift and thorough. Derek had filed charges for harassment and invasion of privacy. 3 other brides had come forward about their stolen dresses after seeing social media coverage of our dramatic confrontation. The district attorney had built a solid case against Vanessa for theft, fraud, and forgery. But Vanessa had surprised everyone by taking full responsibility. She'd hired a lawyer, returned all the stolen dresses with personal apology letters, and entered a guilty plea at her first court appearance. The judge, impressed by her cooperation and the fact that she was clearly getting professional help, had sentenced her to 2 years of community service and ordered her to pay restitution to all the affected brides. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, noticing my change in mood. "My sister's legal case just wrapped up. It's been a difficult few months." Sarah nodded sympathetically. She knew the broad strokes of why I was shopping for a new dress. Family drama had complicated my original wedding plans, but I'd spared her the details of exactly how complicated. "Well, I think this dress is going to help you create some beautiful new memories." She was right. Marcus and I had decided to elope to Napa Valley in 2 weeks, just the two of us and an officiant among the vineyards. After everything we'd been through, the idea of a big wedding with family drama and potential conflict felt exhausting. We wanted something simple, intimate, and entirely our own. My parents had been disappointed about missing the ceremony, but they understood. The past 3 months had been difficult for our entire family, as we'd all had to confront the reality of Vanessa's actions and our own roles in enabling her destructive behavior. My mother had been particularly devastated to learn that she'd been manipulated into helping steal my dress. She'd spent weeks apologizing and trying to make amends, offering to pay for a new dress, to plan a reception party, to do whatever it took to repair our relationship. It had taken time, but we'd eventually found our way back to each other. My father had thrown himself into helping Vanessa navigate her legal troubles and mental health treatment. He'd found her a good therapist, helped her move into a smaller apartment she could afford on her own, and had been driving her to her community service assignments at a local women's shelter. As for Derek, he'd married Ashley Chen in a quiet courthouse ceremony 2 weeks after our vineyard confrontation. According to mutual friends, they seemed genuinely happy together, focused on building a life with their daughter. Derek had dropped his harassment charges against Marcus and me after Vanessa's guilty plea, apparently satisfied that justice had been served. "Miss Rodriguez," Sarah's voice brought me back to the present, "should we start on alterations for this dress?" "Yes," I said, taking one last look at myself in the mirror. "Let's do it." An hour later, I was walking through Lincoln Park, enjoying the October sunshine and thinking about how different my life looked now compared to 6 months ago. My phone rang as I passed the zoo, Vanessa's name on the caller ID.
We'd been talking regularly since her sentencing, carefully rebuilding our relationship with the help of family therapy sessions. It was slow going, but we were making progress. Hey V, how was court today? Weird, surreal, but also kind of relieving, like I can finally stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. How are you feeling about community service? Actually, I'm looking forward to it. Working with women who've survived domestic violence, it's giving me some perspective on my own situation with Derek. Vanessa's therapy had revealed that her relationship with Derek had been emotionally abusive in ways she'd never recognized. His serial cheating, his habit of making her feel like she needed to earn his love, his pattern of pulling away whenever she tried to discuss their future, all of it had created a trauma bond that had made her feel like she couldn't survive without him. The therapist says Derek's behavior was classic manipulation, Vanessa continued. He kept me just off balance enough that I was always trying to prove myself worthy of his attention. And now? Now, I can see that no healthy relationship should make you feel like you need to steal wedding dresses to keep someone interested. We both laughed, which felt miraculous. 3 months ago, I wasn't sure we'd ever be able to joke about what had happened. Elena, I have something to tell you. I reached out to Rebecca Martinez. You did?
I wanted to apologize for getting her involved in our family drama, and I wanted to pay her for the work she did on that confession dress. What did she say? She said the whole project was the most interesting challenge she'd ever worked on, and that she's thinking about writing a case study about it for her graduate thesis. Apparently, turning private letters into clothing is now a legitimate form of protest art. Only you could accidentally start an art movement while having a breakdown, right? But seriously, Elena, I also wanted to ask her about designing something for your new wedding, if you want, as my gift to you and Marcus. I stopped walking. Vanessa, that's really thoughtful, but I've already found a dress. Not a dress, something else. Rebecca had this idea about creating a custom veil with embroidered messages from people who love you, like quotes from mom and dad, or inside jokes between you and Marcus, or even lines from books that are meaningful to you. The idea was actually beautiful. That sounds amazing, but are you sure you want Rebecca working on wedding stuff for me? Doesn't that bring up difficult memories? Elena, I spent months obsessing over wedding details because I thought they could save a relationship that was already over. You're marrying someone who actually loves and respects you. There's a difference. There really is. Besides, I owe you more than I can ever repay. Let me do this one thing right. After we hung up, I continued walking through the park, thinking about forgiveness and family and the strange ways that people can hurt each other and still find their way back to love. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Just booked our flights to San Francisco. 2 weeks from today, you'll be Mrs. Thompson. I smiled, typing back, can't wait to marry you in a dress with no drama attached to it. Best wedding gift ever. That evening, Marcus and I sat on our couch, surrounded by the remnants of our simplified wedding planning. Plane tickets to California, a reservation at a small inn in Napa, an appointment with a photographer who specialized in intimate elopements. It was everything our original wedding wasn't: small, private, and entirely focused on our commitment to each other rather than making a statement to anyone else. Do you ever regret how everything went down? Marcus asked as we reviewed our timeline for the trip. You mean, do I regret turning my sister's wedding into a public spectacle while wearing her ex-fiance's confession letter as a dress? When you put it like that, it does sound pretty extreme. I regret that it came to that point. I regret that Vanessa was so lost that she thought stealing from me was a reasonable solution to her problems. I regret that our family got caught up in her breakdown. But do I regret exposing the truth? No. Even though it cost you your original dress and your original wedding? I looked around our apartment, at the photos of us traveling together, the books we'd collected, the little signs of the life we'd built over 4 years. None of it had anything to do with wedding dresses or family drama or revenge plots. It was just us, choosing each other every day. Marcus, that dress was beautiful, but it was just fabric and beading. Our original wedding would have been lovely, but it was just one day. What matters is that we figured out how to handle a crisis together without losing sight of what we actually wanted, which is each other. Everything else is just details.
2 weeks later, I married Marcus Thompson in a vineyard in Napa Valley, wearing a simple dress with no history except the love I felt when I put it on. Vanessa had indeed worked with Rebecca to create a stunning veil embroidered with quotes from our favorite books and messages from our families. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, I was wearing my sister's love and blessing, which felt like the perfect ending to a story that had started with theft and betrayal. As we kissed for the first time as a married couple, I thought about everything that had brought us to that moment: the stolen dress, the forged documents, the storage unit full of wedding gowns, the dramatic confrontation at Lake Geneva, and all the painful work of rebuilding trust and relationships. It had been the messiest, most complicated path to a wedding that anyone could imagine, but somehow it had led us exactly where we needed to be, to a marriage built on truth, forgiveness, and the knowledge that we could survive anything together. And that was worth more than any dress, no matter how perfect it might have been. But the story doesn't end there. 6 months after our Napa Valley wedding, I got an unexpected call from Patricia at Kleinfeld, Chicago. The same consultant who'd helped me find my original dress, the one who'd been devastated when she realized she'd been manipulated into releasing it to Vanessa. Miss Rodriguez, I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson now. I have some rather unusual news. Patricia, please don't tell me there's been another dress emergency. She laughed. Nothing like that. Actually, it's good news. We've been contacted by a documentary filmmaker who wants to feature your story in a project about wedding industry fraud and family dynamics. The documentary, called Something Borrowed, Something Stolen, ended up airing on a major streaming platform 8 months later. The filmmaker had interviewed all of us: me, Marcus, Vanessa, our parents, even Derek and Ashley. Rebecca Martinez became a minor celebrity for her innovative textile work, and the confession dress was displayed in a Chicago art gallery as part of an exhibition on emotional architecture and fashion. The most surprising outcome was the impact on other brides. After the documentary aired, Kleinfeld Corporate implemented new security protocols for dress releases, requiring video verification calls with the actual bride before releasing any gown to a third party. Several other bridal salons across the country adopted similar policies. More importantly, 3 women reached out to me directly after seeing the documentary. Each had experienced similar situations: family members who'd sabotaged their weddings due to jealousy, mental health crises, or unresolved relationship issues. One bride in Portland had her mother sell her wedding dress to pay for gambling debts. Another in Miami discovered that her maid of honor had been secretly dating her fiancé and had orchestrated a series of emergencies to derail the wedding planning.
These conversations led to something I never expected: a support group. We started meeting virtually once a month, sharing strategies for setting boundaries with difficult family members and rebuilding trust after betrayals. What began as informal conversations evolved into a nonprofit organization called Boundaries and Brides, which now provides resources for women dealing with family drama during wedding planning. Vanessa, meanwhile, had found her own path to healing through her community service at the women's shelter. Working with survivors of domestic violence had given her language for understanding her own experiences with Derek. She'd started volunteering as a peer counselor, helping other women recognize patterns of emotional manipulation in their relationships. The irony, she told me during one of our monthly sister dinners, is that I'm now helping other women avoid the exact mistakes I made. I spent 2 years trying to win back a man who didn't respect me, and now I'm teaching women how to recognize when someone doesn't deserve their effort. Vanessa had also started dating again, but with a completely different approach. She'd joined a hiking group, taken up pottery classes, and was focusing on building a life she genuinely enjoyed rather than trying to make herself appealing to someone else. When she eventually met David, a social worker who volunteered at the same shelter, their relationship developed slowly and based on mutual respect rather than trauma bonding. The difference, she explained, is that with Derek, I always felt like I was auditioning for the role of girlfriend. With David, I feel like myself, and that's enough. Our parents had also benefited from family therapy. My mother had joined a support group for family members of people with mental health challenges, learning how to be supportive without enabling destructive behavior. My father had started setting clearer boundaries with all of us, no longer feeling responsible for managing everyone's emotions. The most unexpected development came from Derek himself.
About a year after everything happened, he reached out to apologize not just for his role in the events, but for the pattern of behavior that had led to them. "I've been in therapy," he wrote in a long email to both Vanessa and me, "and I'm starting to understand how my inability to have honest conversations created so much damage. I kept people in limbo because I was too cowardly to face difficult truths. Vanessa, you deserved better than someone who made you feel like you had to earn love. Elena, you deserved better than having your family dragged into the chaos I created by refusing to be direct about my feelings." Derek and Ashley had gone to couples counseling before their marriage, specifically to address the trust issues created by Derek's history of infidelity. They'd also done co-parenting classes to prepare for raising Ashley's daughter together. According to mutual friends, Derek had become a devoted stepfather and seemed genuinely committed to building an honest relationship with Ashley. The legal consequences had extended beyond Vanessa's case. The forger who'd created the fake documents giving her permission to collect my dress was arrested in a separate investigation involving fraudulent real estate transactions. 2 of the bridal salons that had unknowingly sold dresses to Vanessa implemented new training programs for their staff about recognizing potential fraud. Rebecca Martinez had parlayed her work on the confession dress into a successful career as a conceptual fashion designer. She'd been featured in several art magazines and had shown collections in New York and Los Angeles. The confession dress itself had been purchased by a private collector and was occasionally loaned to museums for exhibitions about the intersection of fashion and social commentary. Marcus and I had settled into married life with a deeper appreciation for honest communication. The crisis had taught us that we could handle major stress together without losing sight of our core values. We'd bought a house in Evanston, closer to my parents, and had started hosting monthly family dinners that included Vanessa and David. These dinners had become a kind of informal family therapy, a space where we could practice having difficult conversations in a supportive environment. We'd developed family rules about honesty, accountability, and respect that helped us navigate disagreements without falling back into old patterns of manipulation or enabling. The most profound change had been in my relationship with Vanessa. We'd had to completely rebuild our sisterhood from the ground up, starting with basic trust and working our way back to intimacy. It had taken months of family therapy, individual conversations, and careful boundary setting, but we'd eventually found our way to a deeper, more honest relationship than we'd ever had before. "You know what's weird?" Vanessa said during our most recent sister dinner. "I feel like I know you better now than I did before all this happened. When I was so focused on Derek and my own drama, I wasn't really paying attention to who you actually are." She was right. Before the dress incident, our relationship had been somewhat superficial. We'd talked about work and dating and family gossip, but we'd never really discussed our fears, our values, or our dreams. The crisis had forced us to have conversations about identity, self-worth, and what we actually wanted from life. One of the most healing moments had come when Vanessa attended my first Boundaries and Brides meeting as a guest speaker. She'd shared her story with the group, talking about how unresolved trauma from Derek's emotional manipulation had led her to make increasingly desperate decisions. I convinced myself that if I could just be perfect enough, beautiful enough, accommodating enough, Derek would stop looking at other women and focus on me. But the truth is, no amount of perfection can make someone love you if they're not capable of healthy love. And trying to be perfect for someone else means you lose yourself in the process.
After the meeting, several women had approached Vanessa to thank her for her honesty. One woman had been planning to take her ex-boyfriend back despite his pattern of cheating, but hearing Vanessa's story had given her the courage to maintain her boundaries. "That's when I knew," Vanessa told me later, "that all the pain and humiliation had been worth something. If my mistakes could help other women avoid the same patterns, then maybe I could find some meaning in what happened." The documentary had also led to an unexpected friendship with Ashley Chen. She'd reached out after the film aired, wanting to thank me for exposing Derek's pattern of deception before their marriage. Watching him confront his behavior publicly was actually what convinced me he was serious about changing, Ashley explained when we met for coffee. "A lot of men say they'll do better, but Derek was willing to face real consequences for his actions. That meant something." Ashley and Derek had since had another child together, and, according to Ashley, Derek had become the kind of partner and father she'd always hoped for,
present, honest, and committed to doing the emotional work required for healthy relationships. As I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized that the stolen dress had been the catalyst for changes that went far beyond wedding planning. It had forced our entire family to confront patterns of behavior that had been damaging our relationships for years. Vanessa's breakdown had been dramatic and destructive, but it had also been the crisis that finally made all of us face the truth about how we'd been treating each other. The confession dress, which had started as an instrument of revenge, had become something else entirely, a symbol of the power of truth-telling, even when that truth is painful and complicated. It has taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive behavior, even if that means temporarily becoming the villain in their story. Most importantly, it showed me that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending that harm didn't occur. Real forgiveness means acknowledging the full scope of what happened, holding people accountable for their actions, and then choosing to rebuild relationships on a foundation of honesty rather than convenience. Today, when people ask me about the wedding dress incident, I tell them it was the worst and best thing that ever happened to our family. Worst, because it revealed how much pain and dysfunction we'd been carrying without addressing it. Best, because it forced us to do the hard work of becoming the kind of people who could love each other honestly. And sometimes, when I'm feeling particularly philosophical, I think about how Vanessa's desperate attempt to create a perfect wedding had actually given me something much more valuable. A perfect marriage built on truth, forgiveness, and the knowledge that love isn't something you have to earn through performance or perfection. It's something you choose every day with all the messy, complicated, beautiful reality that choice entails. 2 years later, I found myself standing in another bridal salon, but this time I wasn't the bride. I was there with Sarah Chen, Ashley's younger sister, who was getting married and had specifically requested my help finding her wedding dress. Sarah had heard the story through Ashley and wanted someone who understood the emotional weight of wedding planning to guide her through the process. "I'm terrified of making the wrong choice," Sarah confessed as we looked through racks of gowns. "After everything Ashley went through with Derek's first engagement, I keep worrying that something will go wrong with my wedding too." I understood that fear intimately. "Sarah, the difference is that you're marrying someone who's shown you consistently that he respects and values you. That's not something a dress can create or destroy." Working with Sarah has given me a new perspective on my own experience. Helping other brides navigate family drama and relationship anxiety had become an unexpected passion project that grew out of my work with boundaries and brides. I'd started offering one-on-one consulting for women dealing with complicated family dynamics during wedding planning. The work had connected me with Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a family therapist who specialized in wedding-related stress and conflict. Together, we'd developed a workshop series called Planning Your Marriage, Not Just Your Wedding, that focused on building communication skills and setting healthy boundaries with family members during the engagement period. "The wedding industry," Dr. Walsh often said during our presentations, "sells the fantasy that one perfect day can guarantee a lifetime of happiness. But real marriages are built in the everyday moments of choosing to love someone despite their flaws." Our workshops had gained national attention after a feature in Modern Bride magazine, and we'd been invited to speak at conferences across the country. The most rewarding part was hearing from couples who'd used our strategies to navigate their own family challenges without resorting to the kind of dramatic confrontation that had defined my experience. One couple in particular had stayed in touch. Jennifer and Michael from Seattle had been dealing with Jennifer's mother, who'd been sabotaging their wedding planning out of jealousy over losing her daughter's attention. Instead of escalating the conflict, they'd used our boundary-setting techniques to have honest conversations about expectations and had ultimately strengthened their relationship with Jennifer's mother. "Your story," Jennifer had written in her thank you email, "showed us what happens when family dysfunction goes unchecked. But your recovery process showed us that there was another way to handle things." The ripple effects of our experience had continued to expand in unexpected ways. Vanessa's community service supervisor at the women's shelter had been so impressed with her peer counseling work that she'd encouraged Vanessa to pursue formal training in social work. Vanessa had enrolled in a master's program and was now working towards becoming a licensed therapist specializing in relationship trauma.
It's strange, Vanessa had told me during her graduate school application process, but I think Derek's emotional manipulation actually prepared me to help other women recognize similar patterns. I know what it feels like to lose yourself trying to earn someone's love. Her relationship with David had deepened into something neither of us had seen her experience before: genuine partnership based on mutual respect and shared values. They'd moved in together after dating for a year, and David had proposed during a quiet hiking trip in Colorado, far from the elaborate drama that had characterized her previous relationship. The best part, Vanessa had said about the engagement, is that I said yes because I want to build a life with David, not because I'm afraid of losing him. That's a completely different feeling. Planning Vanessa's second wedding had been an opportunity for our family to practice the healthy communication skills we'd learned in therapy. Instead of secrets and manipulation, we'd had open conversations about budget, guest lists, and family dynamics. When tensions arose, we'd address them directly rather than letting them fester into larger conflicts. The ceremony itself had been everything her first wedding wasn't: small, intimate, and focused on the actual commitment rather than creating a perfect Instagram moment. David's family had blended seamlessly with ours, and the whole event had felt like a celebration of growth and healing rather than a performance of idealized romance. Marcus had served as the photographer for Vanessa's wedding, having discovered a talent for capturing authentic emotional moments during our own elopement. His photographs from that day showed genuine joy and connection: Vanessa laughing during their vows, David tearing up during her speech about second chances, our parents dancing together with obvious relief and happiness. These pictures, Marcus had said while editing them later, show who your sister really is when she's not trying to be someone else. She looks free. The success of our family's healing had inspired my parents to become more involved in our community work. My mother had started volunteering with a local organization that provided wedding dresses to brides who couldn't afford them, while my father had begun offering pro bono accounting services to women leaving abusive relationships. We learned, my father had explained during a family therapy session, that we'd been so focused on keeping peace that we'd forgotten to teach our daughters how to handle conflict constructively. We want to model better behavior now. My mother's volunteer work had been particularly meaningful for her. She'd struggled with guilt about her role in enabling Vanessa's theft of my dress, and helping other women access wedding gowns had become a way to make amends while supporting a cause she cared about. Every bride deserves to feel beautiful on her wedding day, she'd told a local newspaper reporter who'd written about the organization. But more importantly, every bride deserves to marry someone who makes her feel valuable every day, not just on special occasions. The documentary about our experience had led to other media opportunities that kept the conversation about healthy relationships in the public eye. I'd been interviewed for several podcasts about family boundaries, written articles for women's magazines about wedding planning stress, and had even appeared on a morning talk show to discuss red flags in romantic relationships. One of the most impactful interviews had been for a podcast called Difficult Families, where I'd talked about the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. The episode had gone viral, with thousands of listeners sharing their own stories about family members who'd betrayed their trust and the complex process of deciding whether and how to rebuild those relationships. Forgiveness, I'd explained to the host, doesn't require you to pretend that harm didn't occur or to immediately trust someone who's hurt you. It means releasing the anger that's poisoning your own life while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. The success of our family's recovery had also attracted attention from researchers studying resilience and post-traumatic growth. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a psychology professor at Northwestern University, had followed our family's progress as part of a longitudinal study on how families recover from crisis. What's remarkable about your family, Dr. Rodriguez had told us during one of our research interviews, is that you didn't just return to your previous level of functioning, you actually developed stronger, healthier relationships than you'd had before the crisis. Her research had become part of a larger academic conversation about how trauma can sometimes serve as a catalyst for positive change when families have access to appropriate support and are willing to do the difficult work of examining their patterns. The academic interest in our story had led to invitations to speak at universities about family systems, crisis management, and the intersection of mental health and relationship dynamics. These speaking engagements had given me a platform to address the broader cultural issues that had contributed to our family's crisis. The pressure on women to maintain relationships at any cost, the stigma around mental health treatment, and the way social media creates unrealistic expectations about romance and marriage. The wedding industry, I told a group of sociology students at DePaul University, profits from the fantasy that external perfection can create internal happiness. But real joy comes from authentic connections with people who see your flaws and choose to love you anyway. One of the most meaningful developments had been my friendship with Rebecca Martinez, which had evolved far beyond our original collaboration on the confession dress. Rebecca had become a close friend and creative collaborator, and together we'd started a small business creating custom wedding accessories for brides who wanted to incorporate meaningful text into their wedding attire: vows, song lyrics, family mottos, or quotes from beloved books. "Your story taught me," Rebecca had said during one of our design sessions, "that fashion can be a form of storytelling, but it should tell stories about love, not revenge and manipulation." Our business, called Woven Words, had gained a following among brides who wanted their wedding attire to reflect their personal values and relationships. We'd created veils embroidered with grandmother's recipes, sashes featuring family immigration stories, and jewelry incorporating coordinates from significant locations in couples' relationships. The work had been fulfilling in ways I never expected, allowing me to combine my business background with a creative outlet that helped other couples celebrate their authentic stories, rather than trying to conform to someone else's idea of perfection. Perhaps the most surprising outcome of our entire experience had been Derek's transformation into an advocate for men's mental health. His therapy had helped him recognize that his pattern of infidelity and emotional unavailability had stemmed from unresolved trauma from his parents' bitter divorce. Derek had started a blog called Honest Men, where he wrote about toxic masculinity, emotional intelligence, and the importance of therapy for men struggling with relationship issues. His writing was raw and vulnerable, addressing the cultural messages that had taught him to equate emotional distance with strength. I spent years thinking that keeping women at arm's length made me powerful, but all it did was ensure that I'd never experience real intimacy. I hurt multiple women because I was too afraid to examine my own emotional patterns. His blog had developed a substantial following among men who were trying to break cycles of unhealthy relationship patterns. Derek had started speaking at men's groups and had even testified before a state legislative committee about the importance of funding mental health resources for men. The most touching moment had come when Derek had reached out to personally apologize to every woman he could remember hurting during his years of serial cheating. He'd tracked down former girlfriends, one-night stands, and emotional affair partners to take responsibility for his behavior and to encourage them to seek therapy if his actions had caused lasting harm. "I can't undo the damage I caused," he'd written in his apology to Vanessa, "but I can make sure that other men understand the real cost of treating women as disposable. Your breakdown wasn't just about your own issues, it was also about the way I made you feel worthless whenever I looked at other women."
The letter had been part of Vanessa's healing process, giving her external validation for experiences she'd been told were all in her head. Reading Derek's acknowledgement of his manipulative behavior had helped her trust her own perceptions and had reinforced the progress she'd made in therapy. As I reflected on the 3 years that had passed since the dress incident, I was struck by how thoroughly our lives had been transformed. What had started as a story about stolen wedding attire had become a journey of personal growth, family healing, and community building that continued to expand in ever-widening circles. The confession dress, now permanently housed in a museum collection focused on art as social commentary, had become a symbol not of revenge, but of the power of truth-telling to catalyze positive change. Visitors to the exhibit often left comments about their own experiences with family dysfunction and relationship trauma, creating an ongoing conversation about healing and accountability. Standing in that bridal salon with Sarah Chen, helping her find a dress that would make her feel beautiful and confident on her wedding day, I felt the full weight of how far we'd all come. The woman who'd worn Derek's confession as a weapon of revenge had evolved into someone who used her experience to help others build healthier relationships. "You know what I've learned?" I told Sarah as she twirled in front of the mirror in a stunning off-the-shoulder gown. "The perfect wedding dress isn't the one that makes you look like someone else's idea of a bride.
It's the one that makes you feel like the most authentic version of yourself. Sarah smiled, her eyes filling with happy tears. This is it. This is the one. And watching her joy, I knew that all the pain and chaos and drama of my own wedding journey had been worth it, not because it had led to some perfect fairy tale ending, but because it had taught me the difference between performing happiness and actually living it. That difference, it turned out, was everything. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.